burn it, push it in a corner, hide it, put everything through the shredder. That's not the way. If you truly believe that your philosophy is better, you should be able and willing to debate that openly. Not argue, let's get rid of this, let's get rid of that. I mean, the gentleman, Mr. Abdullah, he could not actually point to anything in the book that was explicit. So the wider issue, yeah, if it comes in, if worse books comes in, well, that'll be different because those books might have explicit material. But in this case, even though I don't like it, I don't have the right to say that it should not exist, that it should be censored, because eventually what will happen is other things will be censored. The more accustomed, the more comfortable we have at censoring. Oh, we're censoring things that I don't like. We can't flip the switch off. We can't turn back the clock when it all of a sudden starts to be applied to things we do like. And there's no guarantee that that won't happen. And history says that's how it goes. It starts off with things you don't like, and then it ends up with a whole set of things that you think is fine and normal, that you want to see exist, and all of a sudden you're wondering, hey, what's going on? I don't understand. Because censorship is fire, and you have to treat it with respect and don't play with it lightly. Do not. Just a food for thought. Moving on, a lot to get into this Monday morning. Next topic that I want to hit, reports of public interest. That's the title. That's the little third there. Because there's actually two situations, ironically speaking, more or less happening at the same time, where there's the argument that we can't release this to the public. One of them is with regards to the Nikon, accident. They don't want to release it to the public. It's confidential and private, it cannot be published. Death of a person. I mean, death of a person in the workplace, not like death of a person due to some sort of private affair. Is that, yes, I understand it's private grounds, but there's public money involved. To what extent does that keep the installation of a private entity? Of course, this is also a petrochemical plant, and the residents in the area, they kind of have concerns. The other situation is, well, in Tobago, there's the audit, and the Chief Secretary said, I'm not going to give out the audit because we have criminal investigations that I don't want to undermine. And I don't want to give it out either to the public, to the media, to the minority leader, to the PNM, to the PM. No, he'll give it to the police and the DPP. Now, to be fair to the Chief Secretary, you give it to the police and the DPP in full and let them do what they will, and for the most part, that should be fine. That should be like the check there, right? Now it all depends on how much faith you have in the police. It also depends on to what extent you have faith that they get the full audit. I'm not necessarily ready to believe that the Chief Secretary will edit the audit, but I'm saying this because I know there will be some people who will have all sorts of crazy conspiracies going on. Now, with regards to Nikon, we just have to take their word. The ministry, I believe, is looking into things. OSHA is looking into things. Nikon just recently put out an ad. It's not only a health and safety officer, manager that they're looking for, but that's one of the positions that they're seeking new applicants for, apparently, last week after the accident. Interesting timing, that. Yeah. And my thing is, well, the public has two concerns. One is the safety of the whole plant, but the second thing is the fact that, look, there's public money invested in you. And are you being run properly? Or are you just another example of amateur hour? Because political connections can get you far, but what it can't get you is qualifications, proficiency, skill, or talent. That's what political connections can't get you. So we have to ask, you know, like, what's going on? Is this plant being mismanaged to disaster? And do the residents living around the area in Point-A-Pair have to worry, hey, I wonder when the next accident occurs, because that's what it seems like, right? It's not a matter of if, but when. Will it affect us? Should I move? Is this area dangerous? To be fair, one could argue those thoughts should be still in a somewhat preliminary stage, but I don't live there, so I don't know what the residents exactly are thinking now. I do know that there are concerns. It would be better if we had a third party who could potentially look at the report and just tell the public, look, things are fine. And I do believe that's what goes on in America. That's why the minority party, and that, of course, at times, and maybe it's because their midterms could cause the majority-minority, you know, in theory to be in flux, because you could have one party, you know, running the Senate, the next party running the House. But the long and short is the minority party or the other party will have access to information that they can't reveal to the public, that, you know, they should not thus be able to use for political campaigning. But when the committee, of which both parties have members in, says, this is the report, at least the public could say, well, it's signed off by both parties. Do we have that in many cases in this country? No. Transparency works for you. So I don't know, yes, we could have OSHA. I mean, OSHA should be an independent third party, but again, the independence of our institutions have been questioned on this show. So to what extent now could I just turn a blind eye to that and assume everything is going to be hunky-dory there? I mean, what happened with Paria? We ain't heard nothing there. We still haven't heard anything there. OSHA had their investigation there. It's an investigation of national interest. So the irony, of course, is on one hand, you have the PNM in Tobago saying, reveal the audit. Meanwhile, the PNM in central government doesn't seem to be pushing to get the NICON report, safety report, accident report, death report. Doesn't seem to be wanting to publish that. And I get it. There will be sensitive information in both reports that probably will not be fit for public consumption. And this is where having the opposition party be read in and being able to kind of like, okay, when this report is whatever, we could say we read it, you know, the summary, the reports, the commentary is fine. They could basically give us some sort of reassurance, but we don't have that. So I could only hope that our institutions live up to their name. Running out of time, moving on. Next story. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did bring up the thought, and I do believe it was prompted by this case, where we're a small country. I do think that some discussion to the question of to what extent do we want to just automatically say once there's any sort of conflict of interest, you're disqualified, whether it is disqualified from getting the contract with the government or disqualified from holding an office, or in this case, disqualified from being the judge in a trial. I said we should have the discussions. I didn't say, you know, let's just let people, you know, because if you just automatically say, we're going to cut you off, we're not going to consider you, we might actually be telling the best candidate or the best option, no. For the sake of a perceived conflict of interest that may or may not be practical in that situation. And evaluating each on its individual merit might have, you know, might have merit of its own. But the last thing that I want to see is somebody basically giving reassurances about themselves and giving reassurances that their own potential conflict of interest is not coming into play. Herself unto herself. This is High Court Judge Betsy Ann Lambert Peterson. She's dismissed calls for her to recuse herself from the lawsuit over the Revenue Authority, despite admitted links between her husband and Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. Her husband apparently plays a lot of golf with a social circle that includes the Prime Minister. And to be fair to you, High Court Judge Betsy Ann Lambert Peterson, you could very well be telling the truth. It doesn't matter. There is a perception of a possible conflict of interest, right? We don't have to connect all the dots. Enough is there for us to have those questions. I'm not saying that you can't do the job. I'm just saying you cannot say that you are clear of a conflict of interest in order to proceed. Now, there could be, folks, something with regards to the logistics of the judiciary that might make it difficult to replace her. I don't know. And that might be why she's insistent of keeping this job, of continuing to be the presiding judge over this case. But the flip side is, there's no proof of this, but the flip side is questions will probably be asked. You know, why is she fighting out to keep this case so hard? She involved in anything? Wild speculations can happen when there is the perceived possibility of a conflict of interest. And one of the ways that you combat these things to ensure that you, in the long run, fight corruption is that you have a clear-cut way to deal with it. Whether that is saying, nope, once this link is disclosed, you're disqualified, we need to replace you. Or, for the very least, having a third party, somebody that hopefully we could trust. The Chief Justice probably is not necessarily going to be somebody that the majority of the public could trust, but at least it will be a small step better than you clearing yourself. Somebody else, at the very least, should clear you. You clearing yourself is like a made accused saying, I didn't do it, and we just accept that? No. Now, the stakes aren't that high in some senses, but in other senses they are. This is a very important case for the public, a very important case for all of the employees of Customs and Inland Revenue. And these sort of foolishness, herself unto herself, really? She's going to clear herself? That's not how it works. And by doing it this way, it potentially makes you look worse. But this is TNT, and we don't have high expectations, really. We just complain about things, and we let it, stay at rest. Last thing, just want to mention it briefly. I have to ask, just what's going on in the UNC? I don't understand. Because another former councillor, and I don't know if he's the current public relations officer for the UNC in the Barrett area, San Juan and St. Joseph constituency, he resigned with a letter dated June 23rd. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a chance, given that the PNM announced their candidates, to cross the fence and be a candidate for the other side. But he resigned anyway. And apparently he said the party had faced many defeats at all levels of politics, and he said those defeats would have been avoidable if the party had made different choices. The UNC is no longer the great party I joined and served. I can no longer with good conscience remain an entity that has lost its moorings of service to the people. Now, we have speculated about certain things with regards to, the strategy of the party. And this is not necessarily out of line with some of the commentary we gave, but us saying it on Talking Point are outsiders speculating. He is technically somebody somewhat on the inside. I don't necessarily think he's speculating. Now, maybe he's spinning, maybe it's sour grapes, and he's, wanting to just do a little damage on the way out. But still, he's not if he was the only one, that would be a reasonable assumption to make. Well, this one lone guy in the wilderness, is decrying his former organization. Sour grapes, moving on. But he is the fourth, I believe, person that was involved with the UNC in local government that has more or less left that party. I want to know what's going on. Is it that the UNC wasn't ready for local government elections? Something that I suspect might be true, but I wasn't necessarily going to bet on it. Which is ironic because they were the ones that, pushed the lawsuit that got us local government elections probably 6 months earlier than the government would have wanted. So what's going on? Because being unprepared, that's maybe the generous speculation. The harsh speculation would be that, there's some great systemic issues within the UNC. Again, myself and Keaton, we have had thoughts along these lines because we don't like the opposition, the way how it's positioning themselves. We think the opposition is weak. We would like to see the opposition stronger so that we would have something to compete against the government. And the government won't, be able to just sit down and relax and kick its feet up while it just, waltzes into another victory and it could just keep doing whatever it wants to do unchecked. That's your point of the opposition, to put a check on the government excesses. We don't really have that for the most part. So I don't know. I don't like it. But I'll end it there. Folks, we'll come back when I get into some more local government talk. And then, of course, we have the media ambassador from the TTPS to end out the hour. Stay tuned. This is Talking a Point on WESN, your content capital. We'll be right back.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
This actually touches quite an interesting point about the call for election observers. Do you know that Trinidad and Tobago has never had for local government elections any observer capacity, because it is a renowned fact that our Elections and Boundaries Commission is one of the best in the world.
Absolutely.
And our media is to be complimented as well for the transparency and coverage that we have.
Yes.
What we're selling on this occasion, folks, what we're asking you to pay attention to is how are our lives going to be better with reform that is here. We are no longer in discussion. We are no longer in hypothetical matters. We are talking about, are you for or against a better style of life? Are you for or against your mayors having full control? Are you for or against full-time councillors?
Absolutely.
So the choice is really now. And this is where we make the clarion call for people to step up and participate in democracy. Because I'll tell you this, choice cannot be had unless there's an exercise of the franchise, and the franchise is in this finger. It's the power to vote. So Laurel, I know you've run for elections. Your feet are deep into politics. Your heart is there. What do you think this means for us?
And I also served as an alderman. in the River Port Corporation. So I have a fair understanding of the operations of local government and the work of local government. And I must say that the reform is absolutely necessary. The system as it stands now is pretty sluggish, I would say, and there's a lot of bureaucracy in getting things done, and the councillors and the mayor do not have sufficient power to execute the will and the needs of the people. And so that's what this reform is bringing now. It's giving the councillors and the aldermen and the executive council the opportunity to really service the people of their municipalities. And with the 141 electoral districts, that means that each representative has a smaller number of persons to service, which makes it easier, which makes your representative much more accessible. And we're giving more power to your local representatives, and that's what this election is about. That's why we're asking you to vote for our 141.
And the more power is significant power. We're not talking about minor issues. We're talking about major issues. Planning and facility development. We're talking about maintenance of schools. We're talking about anti-crime and security issues through municipal police. Folks, I served as an alderman in local government. I've had the pleasure of drafting the local government reform law through millions of contact hours of consultation. And I can tell you this, now operationalizing this law, I am convinced, we, our party, are convinced that this is the closest that we're going to get to real reform in our country, because of, exactly as Laurel said, bringing power closer to people. On the other side of the equation, you will hear political opponents say no to reform, no to more power, no to the use of residential property taxes at $3 a day to meet the gap in expenditure. And we say to the population, genuinely, look at the data and understand this is how we create better lives.
And it's important to ask, why is it that the opposition is rejecting so strongly these changes that will impact you, the people of Trinidad, so positively?
You know what hit me? It hit me what Marcus Gidari had to say from San Fernando. In Marcus Gidari, serving as a UNC councillor, elected in 2019.
And who we just presented.
For San Fernando. But what struck me with what Marcus had to say was the reason why he decided that the PNM was the vehicle to take the message to people. And his position was quite simple, that it meant that reform was for all and that he was on about policy. And perhaps that's why we've seen so many people join the PNM.
Thread. That is the common message and sentiment that is coming out of all of the persons who have now come into the fold of the People's National Movement because they believe in the People's National Movement. The PNM is credible, and we're really serious about this reform.
And folks, I want to put it to you this way. The reform that we are proposing for the country that calls for this vote is a reform that applies equally beneficially to the opposition. We are seeing in some of the seats that we presented, folks, there are instances in the history of the results where the PNM has not held certain seats.
Yes.
We are seeing give these councillors better power, better management, greater accountability. And I want to remind you, we're doing this in the context of having operationalized the public procurement law.
Welcome back, folks. That was a snippet from the PNM's candidate revelation, local government launch. I can't remember what specific term they made of it, but that happened over the weekend. That was local government minister and public relations officer Faris Hawari, joined by government senator, public education officer, and former public relations officer of the PNM, Senator Laurel Azamali Singh. And they had some interesting things that they said there, at least from my perspective. And the first thing, because they started off with reform, reform was the main topic that they discussed in that part of their broadcast and their stream. They spoke about how, this election is about local government reform. This election. I find that interesting because, well, we were told that the local government election that was supposed to have been held at around the start of the year was going to be delayed until, a similar time period in the following year, because they want to implement reform from the recently passed bills partially declared local government reform. I believe that was the point. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's why they took the year. It was, you don't need to take a year to increase the candidate's duration by a year. That's just done, right? If that was the big change that you wanted to do, you could have just done it for the next election. No. They increased the candidate's term by a year because they wanted time to enact at least some of the changes, One of which we believe would be procurement, property tax, which that's the one thing that we're seeing some sort of progress being made as, the legislation, etc., was debated, etc., etc. So the issue is, this was not supposed to be an election issue, right? At the very least, some reform should have been seen if work was being done on it, because we had about 5 months or so before the election was to be called, that we knew it was going to be called. So when was it that they were going to do the implementation based off what they said in the past? And now it seems as though they're kind of scrubbing over that history, not necessarily rewriting it, they're just not mentioning it, and saying, well, no, now this election is all about local government reform because, somehow the local government results is going to preclude Parliament from enacting changes. I don't know how local government aldermen are going to have a say with regards to what Parliament can and cannot do. So I don't necessarily even know why it's an issue. I guess you could say, well, this vote will kind of set the mandate of what we want to see. But the mandate is so indirect. It's so indirect to the issue, right? The local government representatives, as far as I'm aware, do not actually have a vote with regards to the reform. They were consulted, and that was a whole issue by itself, and we ain't going to get into that. But, you know, at the end of the day, Parliament has to, you know, make the decision. Parliament, Cabinet, you know, House and the Senate, etc. And, you know, the government enacts it. So I'm kind of confused, like how all of a sudden something that was supposed to have been started to be implemented at the start of the year, maybe even at the end of last year, how all of a sudden that has become an election issue for the upcoming elections in August. When did that happen? Now, again, like I said, it could be that the government is looking to get a mandate. If they win overwhelmingly in this local government election, they could say, well, you see, the country approves. Technically speaking, though, the country could decide, hey, we want to vote in PNM across the board. That doesn't mean that we approve of their reform. Think about it, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that. And not voting for PNM across the board or voting for PNM at all is not going to necessarily stop the local government reform. So again, it's an indirect connection. Questions were raised by both Minister Alwari and Senator Nizam about the opposition's opposition to the reforms. The irony, of course, is the local government minister, he did say, well, look, this is to the benefit of UNC regions as well. The irony, of course, is Opposition Senator Jayanti Lakshmidiyal, I believe just last week, pointed out an example where she questioned, based on some of the ways that the minority of a council would be sidelined. She used the potential UNC majority-led council, saying, hold on, we could sideline PNM people. That's not right. So why do we want this moving forward? So at least one situation we have specifically where how a minority could just be silenced in these potentially new executives, because, you know, we haven't necessarily seen what the final structure would be. She brought up an issue with that. And she didn't say the PNM going to sideline her. She said the UNC could sideline the PNM. That ain't right. So there is some fair criticisms there. Granted, it's hard to find them sometimes because the opposition opposes everything for the sake of opposing. But it's there. And yes, it might take extra work on your end, but in this case, I think it would, you know, behoove the government to find those important pieces of opposition and address them. Because it's not about appeasing the UNC or appeasing UNC voters. It's about trying to make this reformation, this legislation, the best that it could be, not so? So seek out good ideas or good criticisms wherever you may find them. Even if most of what is said in criticism of the reforms is nonsense. This is not just a light issue, a fly-by-night issue, a political issue. This is going to affect local government moving forward. So, I mean, it's interesting. What do you think, folks? You think this is going to be, you know, the mandate-setting election that it seems as though the politicians, the analysts, the commentators, it's being positioned as such? Should it even be? How important is this local government election? You want to be left behind by not participating? Folks, let's end this here. When we come back, we should have the TTPS Media Ambassador get into more important and maybe unfortunate things here as crime continues unabated in the nation. Stay tuned, Talking Point. We'll be right back.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Living in victory every day.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, it's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had 2 properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
2 properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Airing on WESN, the content capital, on Sunday, July 2nd at 8 p.m. Don't you miss it.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there. Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day. Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back $3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, I 3 goats.
Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know their name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow name Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, it's Monday, so we are joined by our TTPS Media Ambassador, Acting ASP Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sean. And how are you this morning?
Well, it was a beautiful morning, not much traffic. You know, the sun was out, but it wasn't too hot. But, you know, I say that there's always a sense of irony whenever I say that things are going well or swell or beautiful, because at the very least, crime is, you know, in the back of the mind of marring or tarnishing that beautiful image of TNT.
And so true. So you're already getting, on a regular basis, you know, you pick up the papers, you hear on the news, you get it that somebody else died, someone else was involved in a situation. All right. We just want to keep on continuing to speak about parties to crime. You know, we spoke about Saturday yesterday with principle
last
week with the principles of crime. So and trying to inform persons that you may not be the one that hit the final blow, but when in a group of persons and things are happening, once someone get injured where you were involved in it and your group were involved in it, every member of that group can be charged for joint participation, right? They join, so and they can be charged as the main person, as a principal, right? Most recently, there was a particular fete, and there was a social media video circulating where one of the patrons were on the ground and being stamped on the face by other patrons. And the question is asked, what the police are going to do over that, right? And how the police could find them. So for Trinidad and Tobago, as of this morning, one person was already arrested and is being put before the court specifically on that incident, right? There was an investigation done in the Port of Spain division, right? And it's commendable that these officers went way beyond the call, so they took that video, they were able to identify one of the parties in that the video. And arrested that individual, found him and arrested that individual. And he's going before the court this morning, and he's going to be charged for assault with attempt to cause greater bodily harm. Now, the other persons who are also in the video, who also participated in the act, they are also being sorted out. So they can also be called to charge, to be arrested and charged for that, notwithstanding we already charged one person because there was a party to that act, right? And all persons aided and abetted and contributed towards that individual receiving serious injuries. And so the public needs to understand, we see it in schools.
Right, so what about, yes, they didn't necessarily kick or stomp or punch or knock down the victim, but what about those who were around the situation? To what extent now could their involvement be assessed? They took video, they stood back or did nothing, they egged on the violence. What is the levels of responsibility there?
You see, like you see some of the social media videos coming out, and the more the videos coming out, the more competent that the police is getting in terms of trying to find these individuals, right? So at the initial stage, it was a little difficult for us, but we are gaining some grounds now that we have been able to identify many of the persons who videotape. So persons outside there, when you go out there and you videotape offenses, and you videotape other persons committing offenses, you, the person who videotaping, is aiding and abetting by your action, sometimes by your words, you're hearing it on the video. Hit the individual, they deserve it. Why are you waiting so long? Slap this one, slap that one, cough this one down. You are actually aiding in the commission of the crime. So you're party to that crime. No, you didn't hit anybody. You didn't.
Right.
but there is areas in the law that says that you are party to that crime.
Well,
you're an accessory.
Now, of course, there is the phenomenon where it seems as though something happens, and we hear this all the time, and it's not just in TNT. Something happens, and the public reacts by everybody pulling on their phone to record, and no one is actually concerned about the event that's going on. It's beyond the I don't want to get involved. Now it's almost like if, this crime is a spectator sport, and we're getting our social media videos, right? In a lot of cases, that's what it seems like. But what about, is it, however, fine, there's a crime being committed, I'm recording it because I want the crime on record so that there's evidence now to be utilized. Of course, the assumption is I'm going to turn this evidence in, and I'm not going to say, hey, beat them more, right? So is it fine for the public to record for the sake of, well, now we have it on film so that there's a record of party X, Y, or Z who actually did this on film?
So there's a very thin line and some gray areas when it comes to social media and recording of criminal acts. It's dangerous because you become a party to it, because you recording it. It means that you are actually witnessing it and making evidence.
Exactly.
Recording the evidence of the act taking place. Persons don't share that information with the police directly. They're throwing it up on social media. Right?
Which is not a good...
Which is not a good thing in that aspect of it. We have become so how you should say it, unwilling to assist, right? Uncaring in some circumstances that you're no longer willing to help the individual, but videotape the person's pain and agony.
Because in the past, there would be at least one or two onlookers, maybe an old granny who has a little bit less fear, saying, leave him alone, stop it,
Exactly, but now everybody pulls out their phone and record those actions. Now, remember, on our social media, when those records go up on social media, it's open source for police to view any opportunity to gather information about this crime. And it can lead to you. It can lead to your phone. It can lead to your social media page where you have to answer a question. Did you not record this? Were you present? So somebody can say, I wasn't present, but the mere fact that your phone was there and it could be traced back to you and indicate that you were present, you were recording, you didn't assist anyone, All you consumed is recording the incident. Now, that what happened in the effect. Persons were recording. Now, that person may or may not have been a party to the incident, but the mere fact that they wanted to record the incident taking place gave us the opportunity to identify the parties. So it works both ways. Right? There's a pro and a con to everything. Right? Social media has given us an opportunity to get information where police may not be present. And so, as I say, information is stored and sent on the social media platform. We are now seeing things happening that we were not aware of. So, to assist some investigation. But there's a gray area. There's a lot of gray area because the investigation can lead towards you, and you can get yourself tied up into that.
So, if a member of the public witnesses a crime, should the responsible thing be to try to call the police, or to make a record of it?
So, calling the police is one. So I would hope that a responsible, law-abiding citizen would try to get the police to come and intervene and report the incident. Even if you record the incident, hand it over to the police.
Right. Because you could report it to the police, but then have nothing to give them except, well, I saw a guy, he wore a black shirt. That's not,
Yeah. So these are some of the, so it works both ways. Then we have persons who, of the opinion, of the belief that when they go to commit a crime a crime with other parties, they pay a small part, so that's insignificant. Whether you pay a small part or a big or a large part, once you are parties to crime, you can be held accountable. So let's say you drive the vehicle to use the driver for the men to put on the robbery. You go on, you park up outside, you drove the men, all the plan to put on the robbery, all go outside, you park the vehicle, you remain in the vehicle for wait fellas to come out. And then when the fellas come on, you drive out. You're part of the robbery. You're not the driver alone. You're part of the robbery. Right? And persons believe that if I didn't rob anybody, I can't get charged because I didn't put on the robbery. So you went into the place, you tried to rob the place, there was an alarm, and you left. That was attempted robbery.
Right.
Because your intent was to rob. But you did not commit it. But you was intercepted. We stopped the vehicle, and we got information that from the victims that say that this is the person who came in, but you didn't take anything at all. You didn't get through to the robbery, but there was attempted robbery.
How about, now, obviously, okay, there's a fight in a school, there's a fight on a road, there's a fight on a fence, and somebody's like, yeah, beat him more, beat him more, beat him more, and it's on camera. Well, that's an obvious, clear-cut example of someone egging on a fight, and they could be charged for that, right? But now my question then goes to, what about a long-term situation where it's not out in public and being recorded, but it might be a case where a family member is telling you, hey, them people over there, they only messing with us, you know. We gotta get them back. We gotta get them back. It might be difficult to prove, but if it's possible to prove, would that also be constituting of a crime where you're egging on somebody else to commit violence over a long period of time?
It is, and under the law it calls called procured, right? Or you're persuading somebody to commit an offense. You may not commit the offense directly, but in that scenario where we have, and that more associated, well, you will get them in more gang communities or groups of individuals who like to commit crime. The kingpin or the leader of the group will say, listen, you see that man across the that disrespected, we got to get rid of him. Or we need to show him, we need to put him in place. We need to show him the discipline. We need to X, Y, and Z. No, he's not going to say kill anybody, you know. He didn't never said that. But the type of words that he is using,
right,
it's subjective. So persons interpret it. So his members go out the road and say they meet him, meet the individual, and next thing we have a murder.
Okay, quick question. We just have like a minute left. Murder is one thing, but when you basically say things to kind of incite a negative response, a negative opinion of someone that goes beyond just, well, we don't like him because, you know, we don't like him because he treats us bad or he's annoying or whatever. Maybe with regards to the recent, you know, LGBTQ topic, but that's just one example where, you know, your speech is inciting other people to not just be prejudiced, but to actually act upon it.
Right. So we have both areas to look at. Inciting. Inciting is also a part of the law that speaks specifically where your words and actions excites certain, so you have parties and the police tell you to slow down the music, and then they make a comment about the police, and they say the police, and the crowd start to get hype and they start to get aggressive. So technically, you are in that capacity, you can be charged for inciting. Then there also where you have persons who persuading somebody to do certain things, and that is two different areas.
Right.
But the outcome might be the similar outcome. So we have a protest action, so you planned the protest action last night. So you send out in your social media saying, listen to me, we're going to block the roads tonight, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But you tell persons to block the road, but you didn't tell them how to block the road and what to do.
Right.
So persons come out, block the roads, light fires, and some persons go beyond where they may damage persons' vehicles.
Right.
Now the principal or the person who started never said to do light the fire, they say block the road.
Yeah.
Never said damage any vehicle. But persons in that mode did that. So I am saying that based on how the law is structured, all parties are principled. They have played different roles. primary, joint principals, secondary principals. Some of them are innocent. They call them innocent parties that you didn't even know what you're really going to do. So there's a lot of areas in it, but generally what we want the public to know, you do not have to be the one to commit the direct offense. You being a party to it, and a party to it means that you're associated an individual with it, you sit down and you had a conversation with it, with the individuals, the offense took place.
We have to end it there. We're out of time. I want to thank the media ambassador for coming today. He won't be able to stay for phone calls, so you'll just have me to speak to later on. But we have news on the hour. Thank you, ASP Ali, for coming on once again.
No problem, sir.
All right, folks, we break for news, and we'll be back after the break.
This is your WESN News on the hour. Thank you for joining us. Here are the headlines. Opposition sets to strike Monday's Senate sitting. Trinidad and Tobago men beat St. Kitts in the Gold Cup opener. 2 women to be charged for stolen ghee. In regional news, Guyana commits to integrating migrants through open door policy. And internationally, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg agree to fight each other in a cage match. With the details, I'm Keaton Shaw. The opposition indicated it will not attend today's sitting of the Senate. This was disclosed by Opposition Senator Wade Mark, who further claimed there was no consultation on the issue. Senator Mark said it is a form of protest over the holding of the Senate sitting scheduled for June 26th, which is also nomination day for local government elections. During a UNC media conference on Sunday, Senator Mark said that in the past there has never been a sitting of the Senate on nomination day. On August 14th, the local government election will take place. The national men's football team opened their Gold Cup campaign against St. Kitts and Nevis with a big bang. On Sunday, Trinidad and Tobago men's football squad played against St. Kitts and Nevis in a Group A match. The game was played at DRV PNK Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, United States. Trinidad and Tobago surged to the top of Group A in the CONCACAF Gold Cup after beating St. Kitts and Nevis 3-0. TNT had to wait 30 minutes to get their campaign started as kickoff was delayed owing to bad weather. On Wednesday, the national squad will play their second game of the prestigious tournament against Jamaica at 7:30 p.m. On July 2nd at 7 p.m, Trinidad and Tobago will come up against the United States. 2 women ages 18 and 26 are expected to be charged early this week in connection with a report of larceny servant that occurred on June 23rd. According to a police report, on June 24th, officers of the Chaguanas Criminal Investigations Department proceeded to an establishment located in Chaguanas. At the establishment, the officers discovered 16 tins of 2 kilograms of cow brand pure ghee. The ghee was seized while the women of Chaguanas and Freeport were arrested and taken to the station for processing. In regional news, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance in Guyana, Gail Texera, reiterated her government's commitment to integrating migrants through its open door policy. Texera said that there was an integration assistance that goes beyond basic needs. The government gives free healthcare to immigrants as part of its comprehensive policy to guarantee that everyone has access to critical medical services. Texera was the keynote speaker at an event in Georgetown to mark the observance of World Refugee Day. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, studies from 2021 suggested that 24,500 Venezuelan refugees and migrants were living in Guyana. Guyana declared that the same year will impose visa restrictions on Haitian and Cuban nationals in an effort to reduce the influx of illegal migrants. In international news, two of the world's most high-profile technology billionaires, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, have agreed to fight each other in a cage match. Musk posted a message to his social media platform Twitter that he was up for a cage fight with Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg, the boss of Facebook and Instagram's parent company Meta, then posted a screenshot of Mr. Musk's tweet with the caption, "Send me the location." A Meta spokesperson told the BBC that the story speaks for itself. Musk then replied to Zuckerberg's response with Vegas Octagon. The Octagon is the competition mat of a fenced area used in Ultimate Fighting Championship or UFC bouts. And that's news to the hour here on WESN. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you for watching. We'll have more for you at the top of the hour.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. I just have to laugh at the last story that we had there on News on the Hour, presented by Keaton Shaw there, folks. He's here. Don't worry, you'll see him soon on the Talking Point set. But that last story there, that was kind of funny. It made me wonder, to what extent could we see something like that here? Obviously, we can't see Rowley versus Kamala in a cage match. That doesn't make sense, right? And then, okay, say Rowley against who? Kind of old. Don't want to see the Dr. Heath Rowley hurt himself. So, but just in general, politicians tend to be a bit older, but just in general, maybe Faris Awari will be willing to get into the cage. A buff guy, see who's willing to take him on. They could do it for charity. It would be very entertaining. It also probably will be very polarizing here in this nation because our politics, the way it is, hey boy. Anyway, we have a caller already, but I just want to say the phone lines are open. It should be on your screen. When you call in, please mute your TV. When you call in, please be succinct with your points. First caller from Pitty Valley. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Sean, the Ministry of Education repeatedly said the book Rainbow is not in their curriculum.
Right.
Repeated. So that is out. What is going on is a lot of social media talk and misinformation is the children is getting taught in school with the book. So that is out. What is happening now, the book is in a private bookstore. If you don't agree the book like me, you wouldn't go and buy the book for your child to teach your child whatever the book is saying. I do agree with it. If you like it as a parent, you go and you purchase the book and you teach your children it, and so be it. But the point is that it is not in the school curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I see probably didn't have time to touch. Probably this week you will touch on. There's a next tape out with Farley. So I feel sometime during the week we will touch on that. And that is my contribution this morning, Sean. Have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. Yes, well, I mean, it would probably be tomorrow, depending on if I could source the tape. Don't want to assume that it will be automatic. But yes, I didn't necessarily want to touch too much on Tobago's topic. I did with regards to the audit, just because I found it interesting that the PNM would be on either side of the principle that I was speaking about. Just that, Tobago, minority leader, central government. Not necessarily clear-cut so, but it seemed that way. So tomorrow we will be looking to get more into the Tobago topics. And we will be starting with our guests from 8 o'clock there, getting straight into, well, a lot of what's been happening. But like I said, the phone line is open, of course. Yes, I agree with you. At the end of the day, let's not censor the book, right? If the book is legal, it's there for people to buy, for people to not buy. Maybe some people might want it for academic purposes or historical purposes or reference purposes, but it's there, and there's nothing wrong with RIK having it there, right? Let's not censor things. We have Shagonas on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I see your guest do the good thing and go.
Well,
I'm trying to tell him what is the problem. Not crime, it's law and order, and how to deal with it. I have explained how the gang scheme up in Trinidad. He has done nothing about it. What I find strange today is that you see improvement in local government reform and property tax. I don't see none. I have repeatedly pointed out that it's 17 years now this thing going on. And what came out of that initial thing was the regional authorities asked for the authority to collect their property tax because the cities and boroughs had it. And the government put up a committee to look at it. The report is published online where you can see that the government should grant their property tax to the regional. What happened afterwards, the government passed, they put legislation, everything was drafted to do this. But for some strange reason, when they asked me before the House, they did the opposite. They take away local government
property tax
from the cities and ports.
Yeah.
And now the government have all.
Yeah.
And that is stupid because all the research showed that the government's performance in collection of taxes was the lowest compared to the cities and boroughs. So why you, not only that, when Manon come in there the first time, he said everything, no, not Manon, the short man, Minister of Finance.
Right.
He said everything ready to go into place. That is about how much now? 12 years? And one of the most important things that Karen had said when she was doing it, she said that in April of 2009, that is 14 years ago, they're going to publish the rules so people could check it online. Up to now, that hasn't been done. And that is a prerequisite for property tax reform. If you know our law, every year in February, the roll is supposed to be open, that people could check and see what changes was made, how they hold with the neighbors and all this. So, could you tell me why you're so confident?
This is the thing, I'm trying to figure out why you think that way, because the only practical line item that I spoke to about was the fact that...
Oh, you didn't say that. Oh, okay, I misunderstand, you know.
Was the fact that the opposition senator, Janty Lashmilial, she brought up an issue with regards to how easy it would be for any minority councilmen or minority members of the executive body if we get the full reform of what they say they want to have. They would be sidelined too easily. Now, in theory, property tax, like you, I think you appreciate the theory of it to get the revenue. What they're actually going to do, I don't know, because they were supposed to implement things and they haven't. That was the whole point today, anyway.
That is why I see no hope.
Well, I mean, I can't argue with that because what you said reminded me about something I think Karen brought up, and that's with regards to the fact that with regards to property tax, they want a significant amount of people to be signed up for it, to be on the roll, and until they have over 50%, they're not going to move forward.
That's what they're bringing now. There is nothing in the old law about that.
Right. And to Karen, that looks like a stalling tactic.
It is a stalling tactic. She's right.
So I mean, it is what it is. I could only hope, you know, and this may be a fool's hope, that after the local government election, we might see something. But I don't know if it'll be good. I don't know if it'll be good. Thank you, Professor. We need to keep the phone lines open, but thank you for that. Yes, that was a good call. You reminded me of that point, about that's another snippet, another complaint about part of the overall reform meant for local government and how property tax will be treated with, that Karen brought up weeks, if not months ago, when these things were rolling out. And again, you know, we don't really have that much substantial to speak about with regards to the reform. All of a sudden, it's a local government issue, and things are shaping up for this local government elections to be more than just about local government. It's the lower card to the prize fight that is going to be the next general, which might be, you know, Rowley versus Kamala 3. It might be the deciding one, despite the fact that technically, you know, Rowley won the last two. But, you know, in these bouts, people like trilogies, And this is the best we could do. We don't really have much of an option. We don't have anybody else. So it's things are gearing up. Now, will the voting public take it as seriously? 628-4578, call in. Let us know what you have to say. Local government, of course, is one story. The I Am a Rainbow, or the book in Arake, that was one of the other stories. Of course, if you have anything to say out of Pointe-a-Pierre, that region there, and Naiquan situation, would love to hear somebody call in that's living in proximity to Naiquan to see, you know, to what extent maybe Naiquan has put safety policies and procedures for the residents living in around the plant to help assuage their fears and have something tangible so that they could feel safe. Maybe the way how things goes in TNT, I can't necessarily bank on that or feel secure about that. But as we wait for the calls, one of the things I wasn't able to speak about before the acting ASP came in, and that is with regards to local government election and people crossing the floor. And I believe we said this before, that really and truly, what is one of the things we lament on Talking Point on a regular basis? The fact that people vote party and not individual candidates. Right? We see it all the time. We see it all the time. A former party member leaves the party to contest the seat that they currently hold under that party. We saw it most recently in Tobago with a former PNM alderman. She left the party to contest in the THA elections and she lost. It seems as though she was good enough when she was wearing the balize, but all of a sudden she's not good enough. We just wanted her replacement was voted in instead. So people vote party, not individuals. The crossing of the floor, it really undermines it. It really undermines it, because what it says is you as an individual, it kind of doesn't matter. You know, we could put random Joe Schmo, put him in our colors, put him as our candidate. They're going to vote for the party. We just need to get somebody to fill the seats. Now, it looks good that they, you know, people cross the floor and the PNM is willing to trust them, because there's also that to consider. It's not just about I left my party and am I a traitor, but also will the incoming party be willing to trust me? So, I mean, it does look good, but it's kind of undermined by the fact that really and truly, is the voting public going to consider the candidate in this case? The flip side to that is maybe this is the beginning. This might be the start where people might pay more attention to the name and not just the party. Pay more attention to the history and the track record and not just the party. And maybe they might vote those two former UNC councillors in because they are confident in them and it's not about party. Maybe. Of course, to some extent, we will see one way or the other, right? And hopefully, the site is not a bad one either way. We have a caller on the line from San Fernando. Good morning.
Yes.
Morning.
Yes, Sean. You know, this local government reform, the only true reform will come, or this reform will be effective only when the population in those different municipalities and regions decide to become the checks on those councillors and those corporations. If it is that the population do the same thing, same old, they're going to get the same talk and the same problems, and people and the road did not fix any road and they burn any tires and all that rubbish. What the people need to do is start to go to they have these meetings. When the council meets, the public can sit there. They need to start to go to those meetings and understand what is happening within the council and voice their opinions. I keep saying this. If it is the population just keep doing the same thing, what will happen with the reform? It will be the same thing as before. Nothing going to change. Population insurance will be going to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. Now, according to the politicians, particularly, of course, the government who's championing the reform, the major obstacle is money and bureaucracy, right? There's too much red tape. It takes too long for things to get done. And in some cases, the CEO might be uncooperative. The regional corporation ain't going to follow the whims of the aldermen. So there's the bureaucracy. Then there is the, well, all of the extra stuff. I hesitate to say corruption, but maybe it falls in line with corruption. And then there's the money issue. And that's what the government is, it seems to be targeting with a lot of these reforms, right? But, and this is the catch-22 that San Fernando is pointing out. You could change the system, but if ultimately the problem with the system is because people are mistreating the situation, people are taking advantage of the situation, people are not being responsible with the situation, it don't matter what the system is. You'll just get the same thing under a different umbrella, a different name, a different system, a different mandate, a different rule structure. So to what extent is it really about performance? Because there have been commentary now in the public sphere about disappointment in performance. Will we see that affect the election? We have a caller on the line from Tunapuna. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, morning.
I would like to give my point of view. When it comes to people voting in this country, they look at party and they're voting. And since we are so accustomed doing that, why don't they change the constitution, the general constitution in this country, and bring on proportional representation where people will vote party when they do have their vote counts and put a party in there. And when something goes wrong, you blame the whole party and you remove the whole party. And the same thing goes to if the people want it like this too in the local government, do the same thing. And it will be a more fair way that the population will express themselves and change the constitution in such a way that the people have the same. And everything must come out in the public in a transparent way so that the people will know everything that takes place when it comes to running the country, running their affairs, how their money is spending, and they will look forward and can raise their point of view when it comes that you don't get quality work. People don't want to work, they work half an hour, get a day's pay, and work not being done. We need proper supervision and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I don't know if a different system of proportional representation is going to change things too much. I mean, one of the things that you pointed out is we need transparency and accountability, and yeah, that's an ongoing issue. I think the thing is, the problem is, whichever system you have, to get people out, you have to wait till the next election, right? And democracy has this weird thing where you do vote people out, but then it incentivizes politicians to kind of fight for the election as opposed to actually fighting for specific causes in Parliament. Because at the end of the day, just because it's a good cause doesn't mean that Parliament has to do it. There are many issues that needs to be addressed, and the opposition and the government might have different priorities, and that's fine. That's fine, right? But usually it's not really so much about the issues. It's just about trying to be popular for the next election. So that's a hard nut to crack, because do you increase the terms for government? But then it's the next election, if you're dissatisfied, is even longer away. But there is something to be said negatively about if the term is too short and we keep going back and forth between one government and the next. At least given how politicians operate now, where the agenda of the previous administration is undermined, And the problem with that is, yes, sometimes if it's a bad project, we want to see it ended. But there will be inevitably, whether the projects are implemented well or not, there will be things that will help develop the country that get interfered with one way or the other, right? The most obvious or stark example is with the Coast Guard ships and the radar and the aircraft that was supposed to have been brought in by the Manning administration. And after the snap election, the People's Partnership, did away with all of that. Now, one could have argued that maybe for the expenditure, it wasn't the best thing. But it's just an example. I mean, the Children's Hospital in Couva, that's another example. I don't necessarily think Children's Hospital was implemented well. But it is an example of a government kind of looking at a previous project from a previous administration saying, that's not so hot. Because the reason why I say that is at the end of the day, it's not as though the PNM then open up other hospitals in other parts of the country. So we could open up other hospitals and staff them, but we can't staff this one. Doesn't look well on that front. So, but I hear what you're saying with regards to we need to reform the system, right? The problem with that is we need significant parliamentarian votes, more than just a simple majority. I don't know if we're going to get that in our government, not just right now, not just after the next general election, but anytime soon. That might take like the next generation for us to even potentially consider the possibility of getting constitutional reform. And here's the real catch-22 to that. Say we do have constitutional reform coming down the pipe with this current generation of politicians. Are we going to trust them with that? Because right now, a lot of the reforms that we're seeing proposed, things ain't looking so kosher. Do we want the Constitution now to be messed with by people where we have questions that are unanswered? Folks, that's all the time that I have for today. I want to end by just pointing to what's happening in Russia, right? Of course, the war was in Ukraine, but now things happen in Russia where the head of Wagner, he has complaints and he apparently rallied the troops and used military force to voice those complaints after he has alleged to be fired upon by Russian defense forces. Now that situation is potentially died down. Prigozhin has a deal where he could go to Belarus. And the military and the war ongoing conflict, that's not the thing that I want to highlight. What I want to highlight is, let's not take it for granted that stability will continue and improve. Because the situation in Ukraine/Russia could get even worse. We just saw it potentially happen over this weekend. And as the economic hardships continues around the world, just like in Myanmar, just like with other parts of the world, Africa, wherever, violence will continue. And these external shocks could potentially hit us harder and harder here in TNT. Are we ready for it? Do we have a plan? Are we willing to implement long-term planning and measures so that we don't get caught with our pants down yet again? I don't think so, but hey, it's not like I didn't say this 2 budgets ago when we were now maybe coming out of COVID before the war in Ukraine started. Nope, I didn't say that at all. Let's not roll back the tape and check that. I'm just putting that warning out there. Let's not take things for granted in TNT anymore and hope that the oil money just never runs out. Proper governance is a safeguard against these sorts of things. But we let too much slide in TNT. So maybe this local government election should be the clarion call for politicians to level up. I'm just saying. Folks, on behalf of, well, I want to thank DSP once again for joining me. I want to thank all the callers for calling in. On behalf of my co-host who's here but not here, this is WSN's Talking Point. We will see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye.
WESN.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
receiving less than 18%. However, we're seeing many fringe parties making an appearance in Parliament. We'll have 8 parties in the Greek Legislative Assembly. And will Kyriakos Mitsotakis be able to push through with his pro-investment agenda? Will he be able to cut back on the public sector? Will he be able to push through with his healthcare and education reforms? These are all the question marks that Greeks are asking this morning. But of course, with this comfortable majority in Parliament, we think that most of his program will be able to sail through Parliament. Now, another staggering development, and one that should be the main focus of this election process, is the resurgence of the hard right. We're seeing 3 fringe parties, one that is a little known about, Spartans it's called. It was recently even endorsed by a jailed former lawmaker, Ilias Kassidiaris, who belonged to the now defunct Golden Dawn Party, which found its roots in neo-Nazism. He endorsed this party. The leader of Spartans came out thanking Ilias Kassidiaris late last night. Big question marks upon what and how the Greeks voted for. Now, another 2 parties also won. The Greek Solution returned to Parliament. Ultra-nationalist as well, a big no on migration. One of their ideas was to send illegal immigrants to uninhabited Greek islands. And we also have the party Victory, very Christian, Orthodox, family values and nationalism. Will Kyriakos Mitsotakis tackle the rise of the hard right? Is a big question mark, and one that has troubled political sciences across the world.
Natalie Savarikas reporting there. Now, the annual Hajj pilgrimage has gotten underway in Mecca. Officials in Saudi Arabia expecting to welcome over 2 million pilgrims over the next few days. This year is the first edition of Hajj to take place since coronavirus restrictions were lifted. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.
It was a huge, devastating flood that caused the deaths of hundreds of people in Europe, notably the Netherlands, as well as in neighbouring Belgium and in the UK as well. A gigantic storm 70 years ago, right at the point of the high spring tide, caused dramatic water surges. Sea defences just swept away, simply overwhelmed, resulting in terrible flooding. Well, whilst more than 300 people died in the UK, more than 1,800 lost their lives in the Netherlands. The water Noodström came on the night of the 1st of February, around 3 a.m, as many dikes across the region of Zeeland proved just unable to resist the onslaught. At the time, around a fifth of the land of the Netherlands was below sea level, the water simply crashing in, wiping out 200,000 hectares of land. Well, since the disaster, the so-called Delta Plan has seen millions spent upgrading sea defences, already over 500 kilometres of protection, and today the updated plans look ahead to what might be to come up until the year 2050. But with the dire warnings about climate change and ongoing rising sea levels, and as well the risk of increased dramatic weather events also due to climate change, well, could any defences ever be enough? For many of the last survivors of what happened, their lives remain dominated by the events of 70 years ago. Well, Alex Le Bourdon and Ferdinand Van Tetz revisit the Zeeland disaster for France 24.
Water. Waar komt dat nou vandaan? Hij keek in het rond en zag een kleine opening in de dijk, waar een dun straaltje water doorstroomde. Ieder kind in Holland zou rillen bij de gedachte aan een lek in de dijk. In een flits begreep hij wat hem te doen stond. Hij duwde zijn vinger erin om het gat dicht te houden. De straal was gestopt.
The story of Hans Brinker is well known in the Netherlands. But 70 years ago, not even the courage of this little boy would have been enough to save the low-lying coastal land from the water. On the 1st of February 1953, the largest flood in Dutch history hit Zeeland. Thousands of houses were swept away, almost 2,000 people drowned. Jaap survived, but has never forgotten that dramatic winter day.
Daar kwamen de golven dus harder op de dijk. En daar is de dijk.
That's where the waves were strongest, and that's where the dike broke. Because there was more and more water in the polder, which in the end was totally submerged.
Het leven in een polder, achter een zeedijk.
Life in a polder behind a sea dike is always connected to the sea. You live with it. You plan accordingly. You always know when the high tide is, when it's dangerous. People in 1953 were quite prepared for this, but not that the water would come this high. High water happened often, but never as high as 1953.
Maar nooit zo hoog als in 1953.
At the time, Jaap lived on this farm just a few dozen meters behind the dike. When he got up in the morning that day, its protection had already been breached during the night. From the window of the attic where he was hiding with his brothers and sisters, he saw water as far as the eye could see. But it was the combination of a large storm on the North Sea and the high tide which led to disaster.
Mijn vader heeft 's morgens, toen wij daar kwamen.
My father told us in the morning that the water wouldn't come higher than in 1943 when the Germans flooded the polders. But in the afternoon, the high tide comes twice a day. The next high tide came in and added 3.5 meters of water on top. We were sitting upstairs in the attic. And outside, we first heard the cows walk around, then we heard them swim, and then there was silence, because they had all drowned.
En dan hoor je ze zwemmen, en dan is het stil, want dan zijn ze ook allemaal verdronken.
He has never forgotten the fear he felt during the hours they waited for help. His parents survived, but Jaap lost many relatives in the disaster.
This is my aunt with my cousin and her husband. All three of them drowned. My grandmother, like my cousin, was never found. Of the 1,800 victims of the flood, 104 people were never found. Some people were found, but were unrecognizable.
Beyond this personal tragedy, the flood left an entire region traumatized. In the cemetery of Stavenis, a large number of gravestones bear the date February 1st, 1953. Other tombs remain anonymous.
Hier is dus iemand.
Here, someone was found, but there's no name.
70 years later, Jaap comes here regularly to pay tribute.
We zijn hier bij het graf van mijn opa.
We're here in front of the grave of my grandfather, who died in a car crash in November 1946.
De herdenkingssteen van mijn oma.
And here is the commemorative tombstone of my grandmother, because she was never found. It's only in remembrance.
Nagedachtenis.
To honor the victims, there is one right which Jaap never fails to exercise. Every 4 years, he votes for the Water Board. The 21 offices across the Netherlands are responsible for the upkeep of the dikes. In 1953, the whole country was preoccupied with post-war reconstruction. As a result, maintenance of the dikes had taken a back seat. An engineer at the time warned they were in a poor state.
He submitted his last report a week before the flood disaster. He warned that if the water got extremely high, 60 to 90 centimeters of water would flood over the dikes.
But the Dutch learned their lesson from the disaster. The plans proposed by this visionary engineer ended up being the Delta Works. Instead of protecting the land by raising or expanding the dikes, the idea was to close off the estuaries. Over 30 years, 8 huge barriers were constructed to protect Zeeland. The largest is here, at the entrance to the Eastern Scheldt. When the water level is expected to rise 3 meters, the storm surge barrier is shut.
Once the decision has been taken to close the barrier, we go to the control panel and press the button. We do that roughly 4 hours before the dangerous water level is reached.
Since the barrier was built, it's been fully deployed 28 times. The Dutch authorities are keeping an eye on that number. Based on current predictions, the barrier will keep the country safe until at least the end of the century.
The sea level rises 2.9 millimeters a year right now, but there are scenarios in which it rises much faster. And so, of course, we have started to think about this question. Okay, what will we do then?
All scenarios are being considered. The worst case envisions the polar ice caps completely melting, resulting in a 10-meter rise in sea level. On top of these barriers, the dikes have been rigorously strengthened since the flood of 1953.
The land sinks a little over time, and the sea level is slowly rising. So it's increasingly important to have good dikes. If we didn't have dikes, 60% of the Netherlands could flood.
Special attention is being paid to this dike. The Water Board wants to raise and enlarge it by more than 3 meters.
This dike needs to become much stronger, especially because the consequences here would be enormous if the dike breaks. Within 3 hours, there would probably be 5 meters of water. 1,800 lives would be at serious risk, and they wouldn't have time to flee because all the highways would be underwater.
To tackle the threat posed by rising sea levels in the Netherlands, these engineers are starting to think outside of the box.
For current dike reinforcements, we take into account rising sea levels over the next 50 years. Eventually, we'll have to think beyond that, how to reinforce them in the future. For example, will we be able to reinforce them in the same way, or do we maybe need to build islands in front of the coast?
This museum, dedicated to the 1953 flood, explores ways to tackle the threat posed by water, both in the past and the future. We meet Jaap, who was the director here for many years. He's close to 80 now, but has still come today to pass on his story to a new generation.
When we woke up on Sunday morning, the farm was still on a dry island, but the water came everywhere. Over there, everywhere.
My grandmother also survived. She was only a baby at the time. How old were you then?
I was 9 years old. There's the Eastern Scheldt barrier. There was a fishing boat. They took us to Rotterdam, to my aunt's.
Fleur is particularly interested in Jaap's story because of her grandmother. But the young girl also wants to learn from the past to prepare for the future.
We have to take care of the environment because if the ice on the North and South Pole melts, the Netherlands could be hit by a huge flood like this again. Because the Netherlands is very low and that's dangerous.
I'm not afraid of that. Right now, everything is very modern, and the dikes are much stronger than before. The dunes and the beach are also much stronger, so I'm not afraid.
This concern has led to a growing number of young Dutch people visiting this museum, like Sal, a young environmental activist.
Hello.
2 different generations, but also 2 different views on how to keep the country safe.
I don't see leaders appear who are really going to take the country in a different direction. And we can endlessly try and raise dikes and such, but at some point that will no longer be enough.
I truly believe that with time there will be solutions, and that at some point there will be people who truly have a vision who can look a bit beyond. I also think there'll be more and more technological capabilities.
We should also tell politicians that we want things to be done differently. We need you to act, because the politicians are the ones who take decisions. As an individual, you can do your bit, but there needs to be a change within society, and that's something I also protest for in the streets.
To make this change happen, Sal regularly participates in environmental protests. Tonight, he is gathered in front of the only nuclear power station in the Netherlands to commemorate the anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster, and above all, to demand a faster transition to renewable energy. Protest is still the only way for Sal to express the anger of his generation, who he feels are faced with political decision makers who aren't doing enough.
Seriously, allow the Dutch people to have a say. Besides anger, there is also a kind of frustration, the feeling that we are not being taken seriously, and that is something that I see among a lot of my generation. In the case of climate change, we always opt for short-term solutions, and those who should be thinking seriously long-term, they don't.
These activists are not the only ones worried about climate change. The farmers of Zeeland are too. Hendrik Jan is dealing with a troubling phenomenon. With the rise in sea level, the farmland becomes more and more saline.
And that's why, in very dry periods, our crops encounter salinization. The salt causes the crops to stop growing, and in the worst case, they die.
The salination is exacerbated by the drought, which gets worse every year. This farmer fears that this land will one day be unfarmable.
10 years ago, I started discussions with the water board to see how they can get the sweet water here into our ditches. And the measure they took is that they constructed this ditch 4 years ago to transport the sweet water across the island, because we are in the middle of an island here.
In freshwater distribution, priority is given to the Dutch dikes, especially the oldest ones, which could crack if the peat soil gets too dry. First come the dikes, only then the provision of drinking water to households, leaving Sal with the question just how far the country will go to protect itself from the water.
And if climate change keeps going and the sea level rises, which we assume it will in the next tens and hundreds of years, and if the storms get worse, which we now also see, then I'm afraid whether we will be able to keep living here, because we cannot have an endless fight against the water.
It's a heartbreaking thought for this young Zeelander who loves his area. These lands, which one day might be reclaimed by the sea.
Alex Lebordon and Ferdinand Vantes revisiting the Zeeland disaster for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition. You can catch it and all the previous editions as well on our website at france24.com. Thanks very much for watching. More news coming up for you very shortly.
저거 아는 게 뭐야? 바로 되죠? 네? 어떠지 않고ね?もう自分で一人で先見たから逃げてきましたね。探して。
これが最後かなって、多分もう帰ってこないんじゃないかなっていうのは受け止めるしかないし、会えないんだったら無理に会うこともないし。
Japan that disappeared. In Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome to Marseille, a one-of-a-kind place with a heart and a soul all its own.
Located on the French Riviera, this southern port city has been at the crossroads of trade and immigration since it was founded in 600 BC.
So just how is Marseille's rich history reflected in its culture and cuisine?
Join us as we explore the wild culinary wonders of Marseille.
French Connections Plus, presented by Jeannie Godula and Florence Villeminot on France 24 and France24.com.
WESN.
This is your WESN News on the Hour. Thank you for joining us. Here are the headlines. Opposition sets to strike Monday's Senate sitting. Trinidad and Tobago men beat St. Kitts in Gold Cup opener. 2 women to be charged for stolen ghee. In regional news, Guyana commits to integrating migrants through open door policy. And internationally, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg agree to fight each other in a cage match. With the details, I'm Keaton Shaw. The opposition indicated it will not attend today's sitting of the Senate. This was disclosed by Opposition Senator Wade Mark, who further claimed there was no consultation on the issue. Senator Mark said it is a form of protest over the holding of the Senate sitting scheduled for June 26th, which is also nomination day for local government elections. During a UNC media conference on Sunday, Senator Mark said that in the past there has never been a sitting of the Senate on nomination day. On August 14th, the local government election will take place. The national men's football team opened their Gold Cup campaign against St. Kitts and Nevis with a big bang. On Sunday, Trinidad and Tobago men's football squad played against St. Kitts and Nevis in a Group A match. The game was played at DRV PNK Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, United States. Trinidad and Tobago surged to the top of Group A in the CONCACAF Gold Cup after beating St. Kitts and Nevis 3-0. TNT had to wait 30 minutes to get their campaign started as kickoff was delayed owing to bad weather. On Wednesday, the national squad will play their second game of the prestigious tournament against Jamaica at 7:30 p.m. On July 2nd at 7 p.m, Trinidad and Tobago will come up against the United States. 2 women ages 18 and 26 are expected to be charged early this week in connection with a report of larceny servant that occurred on June 23rd. According to a police report, on June 24th, officers of the Chaguanas Criminal Investigations Department proceeded to an establishment located in Chaguanas. At the establishment, the officers discovered 16 tins of 2 kilograms of cow brand pure ghee. The ghee was seized while the women of Chaguanas and Freeport were arrested and taken to the station for processing. In regional news, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance in Guyana, Gail Texeira, reiterated her government's commitment to integrating migrants through its open door policy. Texeira said that there was an integration assistance that goes beyond basic needs. The government gives free healthcare to immigrants as part of its comprehensive policy to guarantee that everyone has access to critical medical services. Texeira was the keynote speaker at an event in Georgetown to mark the observance of World Refugee Day. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, studies from 2021 suggested that 24,500 Venezuelan refugees and migrants were living in Guyana. Guyana declared that the same year will impose visa restrictions on Haitian and Cuban nationals in an effort to reduce the influx of illegal migrants. In international news, two of the world's most high-profile technology billionaires, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, have agreed to fight each other in a cage match. Musk posted a message to his social media platform Twitter that he was up for a cage fight with Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg, the boss of Facebook and Instagram's parent company Meta, then posted a screenshot of Mr. Musk's tweet with the caption, "Send me the location." A Meta spokesperson told the BBC that the story speaks for itself. Musk then replied to Zuckerberg's response with Vegas Octagon. The Octagon is the competition mat of a fenced area used in Ultimate Fighting Championship or UFC bouts. And that's news to the hour here on WESN. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you for watching. We'll have more for you at the top of the hour.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. We have a duty to protect and respect refugees and our obligation to open more avenues of support, resettle, and to help them rebuild their lives and dignity. We need greater support internationally from host countries as called for by the Global Compact for Refugees to both access quality education, decent work, healthcare, housing, and social protection. Those were some defining statements in an issue put out by the Secretary General of the of the United Nations, marking June 20th this year as International Refugee Day, World Refugee Day. We have a situation in Trinidad and Tobago. How are we addressing it? Nafiza Mohammed is an attorney with matters in the court as we speak, dealing with those people who come here to Trinidad and Tobago to seek our help and support in this area of humanity. She's our guest in this edition of the program. Good to see you. Good to have you, Nafiza.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me, Andy.
All right, let me ask you you have a couple of matters on the docket in the courts in Trinidad and Tobago as we speak, treating with people who have come here to seek the help that the UN Secretary General has pointed out that they would need. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Agonizing and sad to know that until this day, we are still not getting it right, because we have to recognize that a refugee is a victim of a situation. A refugee is someone who leaves their home country because of fear for their lives, for their safety, some persecution, for whatever reason, be it political, social, whatever it is. And since 1951, Trinidad and Tobago had signed a treaty all over the world, countries all over the world have had that 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugee signed, and in 1967 there were certain protocols that were added to it, and we in Trinidad and Tobago acceded to this convention way back in 2000. You will recall that there is the Transnational Organized Crime Convention. That is a convention that sets certain basic standards and guidelines for countries all over the world to deal with certain situations that have been arising with the easy ability to move from one country to the next, whether by land, by air, by sea, however it is. When you are crossing borders, you know, there are certain situations that will arise. Now, a refugee who is fleeing their home country, they are leaving, and there are certain cornerstone principles that are recognized worldwide when it comes to refugees. One is the principle of non-refoulement, and the other one is the principle of non-detention. Because you are fleeing and because you fear for your life and your safety, because there are differences in the definitions, all right? A person who lands up in another country, if they declare that they are seeking asylum throughout the world, most countries in the world have certain practices and standards that are applicable. We in Trinidad and Tobago, our Immigration Act is archaic. It was passed in 1969. And we are signatories to the convention dealing with the status of refugees, and we are duty-bound to incorporate certain things in our laws, and it is taking far too long. I think there is a high level of misunderstanding at the highest levels when it comes to these migrant issues. We have to recognize that Trinidad and Tobago, being an island state in the Caribbean, like so many other countries all over the world, we do have an irregular influx of people who are coming into the country and out of the country. We have to build our capacity to determine who are these migrants, what type of migrants are they? And this is where the framework that is recognized through that convention that countries all over the world subscribe to, it does set something, a framework that we ought to be putting in place now, especially.
All right. Now, let me just read again from what is the sort of some of the protocols that the United Nations has established over the years. It says here, asylum seekers and refugees are protected from forcible return to a country in which their life or freedom may be in danger on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Even if you enter a country without a visa or entry permit, you may not be deported while your asylum claim undergoes a due process of analysis. And they talk about protection and asylum. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, any person whose life is in danger in their own country has the right to seek protection and asylum in another country.
So, Andy, therein lies a big problem, because I have had cases to deal with where persons who I know have been registered. You see, the High Commission for Refugees, that is, you know, a worldwide it's a global non-profit organization. It is part of the United Nations system. And in Trinidad and Tobago, that agency relies on the Living Waters community as the chosen
because when there wasn't such an office, the Living Water community had the commission to carry it out. They have been at the forefront from the years now. And the thing about it is that, you know, in terms of persons seeking asylum here, from the time you indicate, or if you are registered with the Living Waters community, there is a procedure that is involved for determining your status as a refugee. And that has to do, there is the UNHCR has an office right around the savannah, and you eventually get a card, which is a form of recognition that you are seeking refugee status in the country. And therefore, that principle of there should not be any forcible returning of that individual to their home country, because I have had cases where persons who have been registered, they have actually been deported. And this is where I think there's a mismanagement of the processes and the systems, because there is a need. You see, there was a refugee unit set up within the immigration division. I think in 2014, there is an ad hoc policy document that was publicized. And when the government changed in 2015, the current Prime Minister indicated that that policy document is also applicable to with the new government that had come in. And from then until now, that policy was builded, it was towards a phased approach for a refugee law in this country. We, to this day, do not have a refugee law enacted in our statute book. And I cannot help but wonder why. What is the phobia? What is the fear? Are you fearful that there will be some massive influx? You are wrong, because according to the IOM and other agencies that deal with these migration issues, it is far better for you to put systems in place to manage the process
than to leave it unmanaged.
And the IOM is the International
Organization for Migration. The IOM and the UNHCR, I know that for some years they have been working in our country. Way back in 2004, I mean, at the time, I know that the IOM, they have done a lot of work with our immigration system and the need for tightening up the borders, the border security issues and management. There was, in fact, a cabinet decision taken in 2006. And you see, those who are in power now would not know of these things because they will not give you an opportunity to be heard on these issues.
Yeah. Do you think it happens sort of vice? Because I've known of at least one case in which somebody who had come from a country in the Middle East and he was here sort of working with the living water community at the time, and he got to be settled in Australia.
I know the guy, an Iraqi, I think he was, and he took 5 years. But the process, and I met the UNHCR people who came every year, they would come into the country. And let me just give you some statistics. When I got back into the AG's office as a legal consultant in 2002, I recall that at that time from the Human Rights Unit, we were aware of just 2 persons seeking refugee status in this country. All of a sudden in 2003, it reached to 35. By 2004, the number had reached to 65. And it was then that I sat around a table with persons from national security and the UNHCR and the Living Waters community. And an ad hoc procedure was developed to deal with these cases. Around that time, if you recall, there was in fact a refugee crisis existing, I think with Haiti and Santo Domingo and those neighboring islands or countries. And
2004, thereabouts.
Thereabouts, correct. So that, you know, we were seeing an increase in numbers. It had reached 200 and something by about 2005, thereabouts. And over the years now, I know that certain other issues, because we were signatories, we had acceded to the Transnational Organized Crime Convention. A lot of work was being focused on the trafficking in persons law that needed to be enacted. And in fact, a task force was set up. And by 2009, 2010, there was a draft policy and a bill that was left in the pipeline when the government changed, and that became law. To this day, they have not enacted the Smuggling of Persons Act, which is an integral part. And the Refugee Act is an integral part of that convention as well. So that we have sticking on now, since around 2016, 2017, where we have an actual refugee crisis on our doorsteps with what has been happening in Venezuela. I mean, I just saw some information online that suggested that there are more than 35,000 persons seeking refugee status, all migrants from Venezuela, who would have come across here. So there are inconsistencies with the statistics, with the records, with the information that is out there in the public domain. I am minded to believe the UNHCR's figures. I know that in 2019, when the influx of irregular migrants coming in from Venezuela was so significant, a plaster was put on the sore, figuratively.
So what do you mean? The system by which people were allowed to...
The government tried to stem the tide a bit or to manage it a bit by declaring an amnesty for 2 weeks so that migrants from Venezuela had the opportunity to be registered.
People got registered.
We saw the thousands of people lined up in the blazing hot sun. But the mistake that is being made is the authorities relying on that 16,000 database as if it is the be-all and the end-all. I recall shortly after that exercise, or during the process, concerns were being expressed by refugees themselves, persons who had been registered, they came in as asylum seekers, they had the UNHCR cards, and they were afraid to go and be registered because they were fearful of having to be sent back to their home country, where there was a lot of instability and unrest at the time. People's lives, people who took part in protests, their lives were in danger, and they were fleeing. They were not only coming to Trinidad, they were going to Colombia and other neighboring territories. It's a phenomenon, and countries must be strong enough and sensible enough to recognize that when a person lands up on your shoreline or wherever they enter, because invariably they are fleeing, so they will come in illegally. They wouldn't come with a visa or what have you. They wouldn't have time to get their documents in order. So when you know that they are claiming to be an asylum seeker and they are seeking refugee status, you have to treat with them in accordance with certain best practices that are recognized globally. A refugee, we have to recognize all the time, is a victim of a phenomenon, and they are in need of protection, and hence the reason why, especially when it comes to women and children. You see issues, for example, like health facilities to health, access to health facilities, access to education.
Well, from what my reading, some of it suggests, it lays out access to banking services, to immigration and criminal justice systems. Correct. People may apply for permanent residence in Trinidad and Tobago under certain conditions and so on.
Exactly.
I want to come back to what you see as probably the reluctance on the part of those who have to make the decisions. But in the middle of the heights of that issue a couple of years ago, there was a group of people from Cuba who had come, and their position was that they didn't want to stay in Trinidad, but they wanted to be able to benefit from these statements of intent that we have here, to go elsewhere. What has happened? Do you know what has happened with
Well, it's not only from Cuba. I know there are many persons from India, from Bangladesh, different persons who have, people are on the move. In many instances, people are just coming through our country to get out and go elsewhere, in North America or Canada or wherever. And because of where we are geographically located, there is that constant influx of people. But from a management point of view, you are far better off to put systems in place. I think one of the mistakes we have made is that we have failed to categorize the migrants, especially those who have come in from Venezuela. When that amnesty was declared, for example, the government had a golden opportunity. You have many persons who left Venezuela for economic reasons. They came looking for a little job to go back or whatnot. Why can't we do something to regularize the situation? And for example, like how when every year the Canadian government advertises that they are recruiting people to come and pick apples in Canada.
Seasonal farm workers
Seasonal
program.
farm workers, and they go and they work for 6 months and come back, and it's well managed. You know who went, you know when they're coming back. They give them a visa for that period of time, and they go and come. And that is what we should have been doing. We have had the pineapple farmers, we have had manufacturers, persons who have indicated their willingness to, absorb some of the capacity, because these people, some of them is really, they would like to work and whatnot. Had we been categorizing it, and you have your economic migrants as one category, you could have been working with your different farming association, manufacturers association, and getting some management systems in place to deal with that influx. But when it comes to the asylum seekers and refugees, we are failing miserably. And the authorities are very xenophobic in their approach. I think maybe in recent times there might be a little recognition that, look, you can't just deport them, because I have seen deportation orders signed by former Minister Stuart Young, and even with Minister Hines signing these deportation orders.
And is there not an inconsistency, a definite inconsistency between that and the intentions that we brought into with the convention from 1967?
Definitely, and it's going against all the basic human rights and humanitarian law considerations that other countries around the world recognize. There are certain basic standards that you are expected to comply with, and we just keep embarrassing ourselves with this very xenophobic approach. And I think even now, whether if some training has been done in recent times, I know before 2010, a lot of training was taking place with our immigration officers, customs officers of the state, in national security, in the AG's office, the social services, and what have you. But then, in the last few years, I'm not there, I can't say what's happening, but I am really always, frustrated when I have to deal with clients and immigration You know, there are some basic things, you just simply having access as an attorney at law to be able to speak to them. At least it could help to eliminate so much. It is no wonder that so many cases have ended up in court, and judgments, the Privy Council would have given judgments against the state in their handling of some of the serious matters.
Your colleague at the bar, Umlala, he took on a matter a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 5 people from the Cameroons who, you saw videos of them. And they got here sort of a roundabout way, and so that, you know anything about what has happened with it?
I don't know. I don't know what is the recent situation, but the fact is that we as lawyers, I mean, we are confronted regularly with situations. And the sad part, you see, with women and children, I have had to deal with women who were imprisoned in the women's prison in Aruca, women pregnant, women who had little babies. They were locked up for 9 months. For what? For what? You know, and the way how the system is just churning out. Look, this morning I had a matter, and a gentleman incarcerated for 2 years, a little domestic situation. They can't find the virtual complainant. The state has not been ready. And 2 years you want to prosecute a man for something that it is a very minor situation. I had to really, you know, express my concerns in court this morning. It's a grave injustice. And these are migrants. Some of them, they are begging, look, let them be deported instead, rather than having to be locked up in prison. That is the principle of non-detention. And the authorities need to pay attention to what is going on and do a check in the prisons to see how many migrants we have locked up and why aren't they working with the Living Waters community and the UNHCR and trying to streamline the thing.
And in a lot of cases, people who get sent to the immigration detention center, that ought not to be the case.
That immigration detention center came into being in 2009 only because we had CHOGM and Summit of the Americas. And the way for immigration offenses, how we treat individuals, human beings, they're entitled to certain basic human rights. And you treat them as if they are some common criminals and incarcerating them for long periods of time. This is something we need to revisit. Our country standing in the international arena when it comes to human rights and our humanitarian rights, where we are, it is a decline that has been taking place. And I wish the authorities would stop being so arrogant and listen and try to improve the situation. Our country's image is involved, and I've been embroiled in so many issues where our international standing has been, you know, under this microscope worldwide. We have, you're talking about refugees and the Venezuelan crisis here. We have, and forgive me for raising it again, we have 72 of our own children, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and 25 women who are languishing in certain refugee camps in Syria. And they are living in conditions that are, because of the numbers, 70,000 people were in one camp, women and children. These are, when it comes to women and children, they are more vulnerable, and they need urgent protection. Our government needs to do much more than it's doing, and they can get a lot of help if only they would show a willingness to talk to critical stakeholders.
But with that is concerned, I think just after there was a visit here by people from the organization called Human Rights
Watch came.
And
what has happened from then till now?
Well, wasn't there
I have been silent. Let me tell you, I'll be very blunt, because they have tried to silence me in the process. I have behaved myself, and I have been a bit quiet for the last 4 months. Out of the blues, they appointed former Speaker Nizam Mohammed to be the head of a repatriation team.
Patrick Edwards, a retired diplomat.
Patrick Edwards, a man with immense experience and somebody who I know could resolve this matter in a matter of days. But does he have the latitude and the authority to do that? And I think that is where the state is sticking. Because you had big PR and things on the front page of the newspapers about the repatriation team being appointed. But was that just intended to be some cosmetics, or is it real? Because I asked the question, where are the women and the children? When are they coming home? If I was very happy that our Prime Minister saw it fit to appoint a team to look at the matter. But I think the composition of the team should perhaps be revisited, and that the relatives are in a position to collaborate with the team, with government officials, and to help to expedite the return of our citizens.
There's no sort of update on any progress report as to what has happened?
I am longing to know what's happening. It has been since March month that repatriation team was appointed. In April, May, June, we heard about big fanciful opening of an office in San Fernando. You think those women and children languishing in the camps could have, they want to know that you're waiting for an office to make this repatriation a reality? What has happened? There are other countries that are involved and are willing, they have indicated their willingness to help to bring citizens back into their country. The NGOs globally are begging governments to take back their citizens.
And then based on the activism of another firm in the legal profession, C.J. Williams and Company.
He has been at the forefront.
And they were working with a couple of cases as well. And what some of the things they shared with me was that in some cases people had signed a statement saying, well, what they would do and what they would activities they would
have an agreement, that a draft, it's like they call it a civil contract.
Yes.
That if when these children and women return home, that they will comply and be cooperative with whatever has to be done, because their reintegration, because of the trauma and all of that they would have been through, it is recognized that they are going to need some support systems. And there are non-profit organizations in this country willing to assist, so that it's not as though the government is going to be saddled with the responsibility. The Muslim community here has been a vibrant section of our community that has helped to build this country. And regardless of our ideological differences, I'm a very traditional Sunni Muslim. Those persons who went across to Syria, I would say that they probably subscribe to the fundamentalist schools of thought. But notwithstanding that, we have a level of peaceful coexistence, and I have stuck my neck out because I know the suffering and being trained in the field. These are women and children, and we need to expedite the returning of these children and women to our home country. And when they come here, we have enough capacity. We are already way ahead in terms of building capacity to lend support for their resettlement and their reintegration in collaboration with the state.
I want to ask you a little bit about our feelings as a people. Let's put aside the administration and their approach that is under question. What do you make of the attitudes of some of us as citizens on the matter, to where we stand, what our understanding?
You see, our country is a very diverse society, and there has been a high level of Islamophobia that exists in different quarters and all over the world. And but if it's one thing in our country, I have so much faith and confidence in our citizens. Just look at the Venezuelan crisis. It is our citizens who have been picking up the slack, where the state should have been helping. It is neighbors and Trinidadians, families who have been helping some of these Venezuelan migrants.
In San Fernando and other areas, some people have gone about it to set up schools and kitchens.
Correct. And that's who we are. We are people with a heart, and we were always willing to help. And these are our citizens in Syria who begging to come back home, and we taking too long. I am not here to bash anyone. I was very relieved that the Prime Minister saw it fit. And once that political will was shown from the top, then those in the ministries, they had 4 ministers lined up there. And the AG's office has been stuck on wanting to have legislation to bring them home. You want to criminalize little children, 6-year-old and 7-year-old, and you're so afraid of them that you need legislation to control them, when we have put in place an elaborate child protection modern framework already with new legislation, with the package of children legislation. We have systems already in place. You don't need to criminalize these people unless you have information. If you do the crime, you do the time. Yeah. I am not aware that these children and women have committed any mayhem. Because of their ideological beliefs with the husbands who took them there and whatnot, most of the men have been killed already. How much more punishment you want?
Yeah, but we have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Nafiza Mohammed. The issue is how we as a society particularly dealing with the question of people who come here looking for that kind of help as refugees or asylum seekers. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
Living in victory every day.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, it's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had two properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
Two properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Airing on WESN, the content capital, on Sunday, July 2nd at 8 p.m. Don't you miss it.
Between 2020 and 2022, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service recorded 4,857 reports of domestic violence.
And there was a general figure that 10% of men may be abusers. When we look at the abusers, we found that some of them, it's like a scripted behavior.
Let's say my sister, I suspect she's in an abusive relationship. What are the signs that I need to look out for? Early signs.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there. Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day. Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back 3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow named Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
firefighters in battling the blazes.
I'm a bit sad to see the city like this because we can't enjoy it too much and it's a bit unbreathable after a while. But we know that the firefighters are doing their best to restore the situation, so we're waiting.
The odor is pretty strong, so as soon as I stepped out of the building, not even stepping out of the building, I could smell like the poor quality of air just oozing through the doors. And immediately I had to get a mask because I knew this is not the type of quality of air we got to be breathing in. And it's harder for her because she has asthma, so.
Yeah.
That's it for me. Thank you very much for watching.
勝手にいなくなってごめんね。笑ってくれてありがとう。励ましてくれてありがとう。ラビもママもパパもみんな幸せになってください。
4 years ago, 21-year-old Makiko left home without telling her parents.
I would have preferred it if she had talked to me, rather than leaving this letter as her last message. I still can't believe she's gone.
Despite their desire to find their daughter, Makiko's parents would like to remain anonymous.
Everything is exactly as it was when she left. It's as if time has stood still in this room.
Makiko left all of her belongings, including her purse and mobile phone. She even left her keys hanging from a windowsill.
I tell myself that it's possible she will never return, that this really is the end, and that I have to accept it. If she doesn't want to see me, why force her?
Makiko had mental health issues. She'd just experienced a breakup. No body has been found, which suggests suicide is not a factor. The police believe she simply ran away from home.
After she disappeared, my wife and I used to sit on this bench for half an hour or an hour, watching people go past in their cars and hoping we would spot her.
In Japan, if the missing person is an adult who appears to have left voluntarily, and if there's no clear risk that they've committed suicide or been involved in a crime or an accident, police can refuse to investigate. It means people have a de facto right to disappear. But in France and some other countries, left behind belongings and concern over the missing person's psychological state would be enough for police to take action.
Even though we reported her missing, the police did nothing. That's the reality. We would often go to the police station, even late at night, because my wife was in mental turmoil. One day the police said to us, "Your daughter's case is not the only one we have. Do you know how many people disappear in Japan every year? It's 90,000. We hope she's still alive, but part of us fears that she may be dead. It never ends. Like we're going round in circles. It'll be on our minds for the rest of our lives."
Who hasn't dreamed of abandoning everything and starting all over again? In Japan, many people do just that. There's even a word for it, johatsu, or the evaporated. Every year, thousands of people plan their own disappearance so they can start a new life. They do it for any number of reasons: problems at work or at school, debt, mental illness, domestic abuse, family disputes.
or for no apparent reason. The police's reluctance to help means that some people turn to private investigators. This PI in central Tokyo is searching for a 27-year-old man who had disappeared a week earlier.
Sorry to disturb you, but I'm looking for someone. Have you seen the person in this photo in the past few days?
Recruited by the missing man's family, he's focusing his search on cheap hotels in the capital.
The missing man moved around a lot, but thanks to his cell phone records, we were able to see the history of his hotel reservations.
Using unconventional methods, some PIs draw on a network of informers who work for phone companies, but they also need lucky breaks.
Sometimes things happen fast and we quickly find the missing person. Sometimes we find them after visiting 2 or 3 hotels.
This PI has visited about 50 hotels in a single day, filling his file with photographs and details of possible sightings.
Are you from the police?
No.
Well, then it's difficult for us to talk to you.
I see, but could you at least tell me if you've seen this person?
I can't really say for sure. Everyone is wearing a mask these days.
Hiring a private investigator in Japan, where people value their privacy, is expensive. It can cost €500 a day, and there are no guarantees of success. Fortunately for those who can't afford a PI, this former police officer formed a group 20 years ago that searches for missing loved ones free of charge. Today he's meeting a man whose son was missing for 3 years. Bank statements suggested that someone, most likely his son, had been withdrawing cash from this bank.
Japan has a law protecting personal data. When I went to the bank and asked them if they could help me by showing me CCTV footage from the ATM, they refused. They said it was personal information and had to remain private. I had similar problems with his mobile phone operator. I asked them if they could share his GPS coordinates, but they refused, citing privacy reasons.
Japan's post-war constitution protects individual freedoms, a response to abuse by the authorities during the pre-war days of militarism. That means it's almost impossible to access someone's personal information without their consent.
When I saw his bank account was empty, I paid in some money. If my son then withdrew money, I would know he was still alive. I was reassured every time I saw the withdrawals. It was like a link between my son and me.
3 months ago, his son returned home, but he's an exception. The phenomenon is so widespread that some companies even offer to help people vanish. For a few €1,000s, the night movers discreetly remove a person's furniture and belongings and provide temporary accommodation at a secret location. It's all perfectly legal. Jake Adelstein is an investigative journalist who's lived in Tokyo for more than 30 years. As part of his research, he's come across manuals that explain the basics in how to disappear.
This is the Bible of disappearing. This will tell you all the things you need to do, not only to vanish, but to make sure that no one finds you, including the letter that you should write and leave behind, just that tells people that I'm fine, I'm not hurt, I'm not in trouble. I just decided that I'm sick of this life and I need to go somewhere else. I will come back someday. That's important, because if you write, I will come back someday, the police are not going to open a missing persons investigation.
Many people disappear to escape the pressures of Japanese society, which frowns on failure and traditionally puts group harmony above individual happiness.
In Japan, people have a hard time living with shame. Japan is not very forgiving. Rather than live with shame, our debt, people would prefer to choose leaving everything behind and vanishing and starting over, and some of them do quite well, or they prefer to leave this world behind and kill themselves. I'd obviously advocate vanishing over suicide any day of the week. And two of these books are very much on that theme, like don't kill yourself, vanish, start again.
Japan has the highest suicide rates among G7 countries. France 24 spent months trying in vain to contact one of the disappeared people. We searched locations all over the country. And then our investigation took us to a neighborhood in Osaka. Kamagasaki is synonymous with the bursting of Japan's economic bubble in the early 1990s. Forced into destitution and unemployment, some people saw running away as the solution. For decades, Kamagasaki has been a refuge for those fleeing a previous life. It's one of the few places in Japan where they feel they belong. This church helps the poorest Kamagasaki residents.
They are stuck in past. They have no hope. They lose the purpose of their lives. No vision, no dream.
This man has been sleeping rough for 27 years. Originally from northern Japan, this 63-year-old man came to Kamagasaki after he lost his job and couldn't pay off his gambling debts.
To be honest with you, I lost my life because of betting on things like horse racing. My brother could no longer look after me. His in-laws and other people didn't like that he was doing that. I thought about it and decided to leave and live alone. Yes, I just walked away.
You left without saying anything?
Yes. I just said, live your life and I'll live mine. And I broke off all contact. I'm around 60. I could have had grandchildren at this age. But I will die alone because I have lost all contact with my brothers and sisters. That's my life. That's all I have.
Not all of the people here belong to the ranks of the evaporated. And not all people who quietly walk away from their lives end up living on the streets. The rate of disappearance has slowed during the coronavirus pandemic. People traveled less because they were scared of catching the virus. But new problems, like the cost of living crisis, risk pushing more people into the unknown and plunging their families into despair.
Spread over nearly 130 square kilometres, the Belgian port of Antwerp is a difficult place for authorities to monitor. It's become the main gateway into Europe for cocaine traffickers, and last year, a record 110 tonnes of the drug were seized here. This truck from Bulgaria is passed through the scanner, a treatment reserved for just a small proportion of traffic here.
Controls at the port of Antwerp see between 1.5 and 2% of containers checked. That's the European norm. But we want to be able to check more and more via recruitment and investment in scanners.
With nothing suspicious found, the truck is sent on its way. Others will have to be searched.
If there is a suspicious image on the scanning image, then we have to look into that area, always.
This agent is looking for counterfeit goods. But customs officers also know the telltale signs of containers used to conceal drugs, like this one spotted a few months ago.
This is a typical load of bananas. There you can clearly see their shapes, but the scanner shows us the mass is not the same, and there we have 2 tons of cocaine which have been hidden.
A smuggling problem which has tarnished this city. At the beginning of January, an 11-year-old girl was shot dead in a suspected settling of scores linked to the drugs trade. Joris is a legal correspondent at the local newspaper and regularly receives shocking videos from criminal gangs.
They do not only attack each other's houses, they also film it, because they're really seeking public attention to feel more terror and to threaten their opponents, their enemies.
This city of 500,000 people is locked in a drugs war that's overwhelmed the system.
There's more crime than our local police and our justice system can cope with. So there's really a crisis going on in the capacity what our local authorities can do against the problem.
Belgium's drug crime problem stretches beyond the Antwerp area. Here in the city of Liège, a trial unprecedented in scale is taking place. 37 defendants are accused of involvement in international drugs trafficking. It's the first time this lawyer has worked on a case like it.
Usually, when you're a criminal lawyer in a city like Liège, you're dealing with retail crime, dealing on the streets, etc. Here, we're talking more about massive wholesale imports via the ports of Northern Europe.
Authorities have had to invest 700,000 euros to secure the courtroom. Bulletproof windows, a reinforced police presence. Even Belgium's justice minister has been directly threatened by suspected traffickers.
It's a security measure which we couldn't really do without, given the level of the threat. Imagine something happened, like a magistrate being killed or one of the defendants attacked. Even if it costs a bit of money, I believe that we can never be too careful.
In 2021, the takedown of the Sky ECC encrypted messaging app saw the arrest of numerous drugs trafficking suspects. A big victory for the Belgian police. Now it's down to the justice system to follow up.
How can you deal with criminals who have absolutely mind-blowing means at their disposal? Sometimes they have millions of euros in accounts in cryptocurrency. Those with the means can buy and destabilize. All of these challenges are completely new, very different from the terrorist threat, for example, where ultimately the means involved were very limited.
As trafficking thrives, drug use has skyrocketed. Analysis of wastewater in nearly 80 European cities saw Antwerp come out with the highest concentration of cocaine. Brussels was not far behind. David's a former addict who now helps those dealing with dependency. He says the drugs landscape has changed beyond recognition.
There never used to be so much trafficking. There were no dealers who delivered straight to your living room. Sometimes we had to go to Holland to get it. It wasn't just everyone like today. The environment has changed so much. Now it's like calling a taxi company. You call up and within a quarter of an hour you've got drugs. A lot more people have access now.
This young man, who preferred to remain anonymous, is once again trying to kick his cocaine habit. A challenge in a city like Antwerp, where drugs are easy to find.
It is definitely easier in Antwerp. It's much more available. Well, back in the day, I texted one number, and after a week, I got texts from 10 different numbers. You can pick any dealer. It was definitely very difficult in periods that I was trying not to use, because then you block one number, but a couple of days later, you get a text from another number, and it triggers you.
This time, he changed his number before starting treatment. A precaution in the face of an illegal trade that's become ever more professional.
WESN.
This is your WESN News on the hour. Thank you for joining us. Here are the headlines. Opposition sets to strike Monday's Senate sitting. Trinidad and Tobago men beat St. Kitts in Gold Cup opener. 2 women to be charged for stolen ghee. In regional news, Guyana commits to integrating migrants through open door policy. And internationally, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg agree to fight each other in a cage match. With the details, I'm Keaton Shaw. The opposition indicated it will not attend today's sitting of the Senate. This was disclosed by Opposition Senator Wade Mark, who further claimed there was no consultation on the issue. Senator Mark said it is a form of protest over the holding of the Senate sitting scheduled for June 26th, which is also nomination day for local government elections. During a UNC media conference on Sunday, Senator Mark said that in the past there has never been a sitting of the Senate on nomination day. On August 14th, the local government election will take place. The national men's football team opened their Gold Cup campaign against St. Kitts and Nevis with a big bang. On Sunday, Trinidad and Tobago men's football squad played against St. Kitts and Nevis in a Group A match. The game was played at DRV PNK Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, United States. Trinidad and Tobago surged to the top of Group A in the CONCACAF Gold Cup after beating St. Kitts and Nevis 3-0. TNT had to wait 30 minutes to get their campaign started as kickoff was delayed owing to bad weather. On Wednesday, the national squad will play their second game of the prestigious tournament against Jamaica at 7:30 p.m. On July 2nd at 7 p.m, Trinidad and Tobago will come up against the United States. 2 women ages 18 and 26 are expected to be charged early this week in connection with a report of larceny servant that occurred on June 23rd. According to a police report, on June 24th, officers of the Chaguanas Criminal Investigations Department proceeded to an establishment located in Chaguanas. At the establishment, the officers discovered 16 tins of 2 kilograms of cow brand pure ghee. The ghee was seized while the women of Chaguanas and Freeport were arrested and taken to the station for processing. In regional news, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance in Guyana, Gail Texera, reiterated her government's commitment to integrating migrants through its open door policy. Texera said that there was an integration assistance that goes beyond basic needs. The government gives free healthcare to immigrants as part of its comprehensive policy to guarantee that everyone has access to critical medical services. Texera was the keynote speaker at an event in Georgetown to mark the observance of World Refugee Day. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, studies from 2021 suggested that 24,500 Venezuelan refugees and migrants were living in Guyana. Guyana declared that the same year will impose visa restrictions on Haitian and Cuban nationals in an effort to reduce the influx of illegal migrants. In international news, 2 of the world's most high-profile technology billionaires, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, have agreed to fight each other in a cage match. Musk posted a message to his social media platform Twitter that he was up for a cage fight with Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg, the boss of Facebook and Instagram's parent company Meta, then posted a screenshot of Mr. Musk's tweet with the caption, "Send me the location." A Meta spokesperson told the BBC that the story speaks for itself. Musk then replied to Zuckerberg's response with Vegas Octagon. The Octagon is the competition mat of a fenced area used in Ultimate Fighting Championship or UFC bouts. And that's news to the hour here on WESN. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you for watching. We'll have more for you at the top of the hour.
WESN.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Psyched. I'm your host, Sule A. Joseph, a counseling psychologist by profession. Today, I have a season-ending episode for you guys, a conversation that will go in depth into a topic I'm not sure is controversial, but definitely sometimes is overlooked in this environment and atmosphere where we talk about crime and criminality and children having behavioral problems and issues in schools, especially coming off the back of all of these issues in schools pertaining to bomb threats and so on. We are going to take a deep dive into that conversation today. But first, my favorite segment, Psyched to Know.
Psyched to Know, brought to you by Sule Joseph and Associates. TNT is reported to have a high literacy rate of 96.9%, according to UNESCO in 1990, with other sources going as high as 98.97%. However, in 2015, a survey conducted by UE showed that 22 to 23% of people in TNT over the age of 15 were unable to cope with everyday reading. This was supported by evaluations done by PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, where 46% of 15-year-old students had low performance in reading to the extent that they could not identify the main idea of a text. And TNT was shown in the Progress in International Reading Literacy study that 80% of Standard 3 students were below low-end international benchmarks, meaning they were not educated to a basic level of reading. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, eating accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher-Price, Cocomelon, Intex Pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at 7 Main Road, McBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Sule A. Joseph, and you are looking at Psyched. Well, this next guest, you all have asked for. You all have bombarded me on social media. You all have messaged on my phone. You all have constantly sent me texts, emails, and so forth to invite this next guest. Who am I talking about? Who could be this potential guest? Of course, I'm speaking about none other than Dr. Wynette Joseph, a.k.a. a.k.a. my mother, a.k.a. the grandchildren demander, right? Thanks for joining me this morning, Dr. Wynette Joseph.
Thank you for having me, Sule.
All right. We want to have a conversation about literacy. Because we know when we talk about literacy, at least I only found out recently when we talk about literacy, we mean more than one thing. When we think of literacy, we just, maybe the person just can't read and write, that is it. But when we talk about literacy, what are we talking about?
When we speak of literacy, we are talking about listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and its interrelatedness. Broadly,